Hey, what's up, everybody? Happy Tuesday. It's time for Stir Crazy. This is episode number 92. Oh, my goodness. What's up? I'm your host, Kim Brown. Guys, today's show, why even debate? We all know tonight is the first of, I believe, 3 presidential debates between Trump and Joe Biden. And we asked the question, why debate? Because really, by now, if you are an undecided voter, you are one of those schmucks that for some reason receives a disproportionate amount of attention every election cycle. And I'm not vote shaming anybody. Listen, we have discussed plenty on this program. Joe Biden's faults and flaws and bad stances on a myriad of very important policy positions. And we know that Trump is just some form of a demon, right? So it's not like we're like, hey, don't vote. But it's about now, why debate? We both know these guys. We know what they stand for. We know what they both don't stand for. Nothing good for Black and brown communities, marginalized communities. Nobody setting forth no earth-shattering policy plans from either the Trump or Biden side of the ticket. However, this is going to be an exercise in comedy. And as sad as the times are in which we live, we have to find the humor in it. And there's going to be a lot of humor in tonight's debate. So we're going to talk about some of that, what to expect from some of the debates, banter between Joe and Trump. But we're also going to take a look back at some past debate performances from both Joe Biden and Donald Trump. We know Donald Trump, from a comedic standpoint, set the bar very high during the 2016 GOP primary debates because he roasted everybody from Little Marco to Ted Cruz and especially to Jeb Bush. That was amongst my favorite clips from Trump back in that time. Also today, we're going to talk about police conduct and the way that police are escalating their behavior in ways that are fatal. Beyond the brutality aspects, there is an alarming trend of police and paramedics administering ketamine to people who are being detained, to people who are in police custody. We saw this happen tragically to Elijah McClain in Colorado, where he was detained unnecessarily, needlessly, unjustifiably by police. And when paramedics were called, they gave him ketamine. He reacted badly to it and eventually lost his life. We're going to talk about why this is a thing and why this is growing in its frequency. But to start off the show, we're going to discuss some of the recent developments coming out of Louisville as it pertains to the Breonna Taylor case. And before we get into that, let me introduce our fantastic panel today. Very excited to be joined with investigative reporter and co-host of the Police Accountability Report right here on The Real News. Stephen Janis joins us today. And friend of the show, political consultant, Marcus Ferrell. Can't wait to get Marcus's take on some of the debate stuff coming up a little later. We're also going to be joined with political consultant Adriel Hampton in just a bit. But gentlemen, first, thank you both for making some time for us today on Stir Crazy.
Oh, thanks for having me, Kim.
Yeah, thanks for having me. For real.
So guys, let's start in Louisville because, the streets are still very hot down in Kentucky as people have been resuming their nightly protests, even though the mayor thankfully called off the curfew, which seemed to be a reason to incite violence against protesters from police. We'll get into that also. But the most recent development is the fact that a member of the grand jury who was convened to, I would assume, entertain charges against the police who murdered Breonna Taylor. One of those grand jurors has broken ranks and wants to make the process, at least the audio transcripts of the grand jury testimony, public. And that has spurred the Attorney General in Kentucky, Daniel Cameron, to announce that, yes, he will be releasing the audio transcripts of the grand jury sometime tomorrow. But I want us to start, if we could, guys, with a clip from the attorney representing the grand juror. The attorney's name is Kevin Glogauer. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Now, the grand juror has not been named. They are requesting anonymity, but their attorney spoke to the press today to give the perspective as to why this individual wants this information made public. Let's take a quick listen at that, Dwayne.
we represent felt compelled to take some sort of an action based upon the indictment that was rendered and the subsequent press conference and messages from the Attorney General's office about how everything played out. At this time, we filed a motion late yesterday to release any recordings, transcripts, reports, etc. of the grand jury. As you all well know, Judge Ann Bailey Smith, in the arraignment for Detective Hankinson, ordered exactly that through the discovery process, and that's something we can discuss. If you all ask the questions, I'll happily address it. But the other part of our motion also was to get a declaration of rights for our client, which would also apply to any other grand juror that was a part of this process. Specifically, we wanted to know from the court system if a grand juror would have the right to speak freely without fear of prosecution, persecution, condemnation, torment, etc., about their experience as a grand juror in this proceeding. Again, our client felt compelled to take action, but before our client can discuss these things freely, they needed to know the rights and duties as deemed by the court. This is not a situation or a case where anyone should be acting without an abundance of caution and exploring all of their options appropriately before they start speaking freely to the press.
So there's a lot to unpack out of this entire situation. And Stephen Janis, we're going to go to you first because I know you have been covering cases of police brutality, of police murder, where police have killed people, a grand jury has been convened, and either no charges are brought or charges are brought and the prosecutors are unable to make a case against the cops. What is your take of this turn of events where a grand juror has kind of gone rogue and said, no, there are aspects about this process that need to be made more transparent to the public?
Well, I think, as we watch policing kind of fall apart across this country and the idea that policing can hold itself accountable fall apart, one of the mainstays and one of the big promises has been that a grand jury is somehow a neutral body that, considers the evidence and makes a decision. As we were talking about before, we went on the air with, Eric Garner and Michael Brown case, there was a grand jury that made a decision. But what it's really showing and what this process is showing is that idea is just BS. Prosecutors lead the grand jury. Prosecutors give the grand jury the charges considered. Prosecutors present the evidence. So if the prosecutor isn't doing a fair job, then, obviously the grand jury is going to return something or not return, in the case of Breonna Taylor, what people might have expected. And I think what's interesting is that the prosecutors in all these cases I mentioned, including Breonna, have used the grand jury as like a shield. Look, I brought it to a grand jury. A grand jury is capable of making its own decision. And now someone is saying, hey, you just put this on us, and it's just not true. And I think this is a profound moment because the grand jury system has been touted for so long as being the objective party in these police investigations. And I think this juror is going to be historic in the sense that they're going to come out and say, that's not true at all. We didn't, as we already know, and I think has been leaked, charges against the two other officers, not Hankinson, but the other ones, were never brought up. The grand jury didn't get a chance to consider those charges because basically the prosecutor is guiding it. And then what he'll do is he'll guide the grand jury not to indict the officers and then turn around and say, hey, the grand jury had a chance to consider all the evidence and all the facts when it's just not true. And so I think this is going to be sort of the breaking point for this concept of grand jury and the need to rethink how we investigate police officers who are accused of things like the Breonna Taylor case. So this is a seminal moment, I think.
I mean, Marcus, what we've been seeing coming out of Louisville, not unlike what we have seen come out of a lot of cities, when people are in the streets pushing policy, pushing politicians, things happen. And for the Attorney General to be bound, or at least from what I can gather, this judge made this ruling at the arraignment for the cop that was charged with wanton endangerment, that what this juror has raised be validated, be released to the public. But this attorney general, along with Louisville police, have been so shady in this whole process, from charging Breonna's boyfriend with attempted murder to fudging the police report, which didn't even mention that someone had been murdered, let alone hurt, to distorting the facts in a variety of ways, playing fast and loose with the information. What do you see happening politically in terms of the actions that are now coming forth? Even after there was a settlement reached with the family, there is still things that are still moving there on the ground in Louisville. Marcus, you're muted, silly.
The Attorney General of the state of Kentucky doesn't deserve to have black skin. He doesn't deserve to have the right to be the same skin complexion as me. All kinfolk ain't skinfolk. All skinfolk ain't kinfolk. And he's one of these guys that has blatantly took the side of white supremacy and refused to take the side of justice. This grand juror, whoever this person is, has more integrity than the whole Justice Department and anybody who's dealing justice in the state of Kentucky. And at the end of the day, Daniel Cameron, he lied. He lied one way or the other. He either lied to us in the public during that press briefing, or he lied in court itself at the deposition itself. But at the end of the day, he's a liar, and he took the side of police officers when they don't need any extra help, right? The sheer fact that we have to fight for just simple justice, the sheer fact that there is a narrative going around, that they create all the narratives in the world possible to justify the death of Breonna Taylor, the murder of Breonna Taylor, is just how that side of the house works. And from the top of the ticket all the way down to the bottom of the ticket, if this doesn't make you as a Kentuckian or make any American watching this a fucking voter, right? And you, because that's an elected position, right? That guy gets up and raises money from a bunch of racist folks to put his black ass on television and talk about how he's going to deliver justice for the state of Kentucky. He's delivering justice for white people in Kentucky or racists in Kentucky. He's not delivering justice for the innocent people of the state. So therefore, he's a fucking liar, right? And he reminds me of a raccoon.
Are you just trying to call him a coon? You could just call him a coon. If you want to call him a coon, why say he reminds you of a raccoon? I'm not following that insult. Help me. Listen,
I'm just saying he's a coon. I just didn't want to say it, but fuck it. He's a coon. Okay. He's a coon. He's a coon. And you know what? And you know what? Not to try to even be funny, but it's dangerous to have black politicians that are running around the state, you know, probably talking black as hell in black neighborhoods to get elected, and then goes and does the exact opposite of justice for the people who actually trust him to do his job. So he lied. And I mean, you know, that should disqualify this guy from office. And I'm interested in seeing what happens next.
Now, Stephen Janis, I know you probably watched the press conference that Daniel Cameron gave when he announced the wanton and dangerous charges and announced that there would be no charges of officers in direct connection to Breonna's murder. And it's not the first time that we've seen a prosecutor basically stand up and give a defense for police actions, absent of the fact that the grand jury wasn't even presented with a lot of the information that perhaps would have resulted in charges against an officer for killing Breonna. What is the point of this staunch defense of cops from attorney generals? Is it because we obviously know that the pursuit of justice is not the point in all of this? Yeah, I mean, you have to think that at the top of this whole pyramid, below it is this whole idea of, you know, these kind of no-knock raids, or this kind of drug war policing, this kind of policing that targets African-American communities with, you know, militarized policing, needs someone to defend it.
because it really is completely irrational. And not only has it never been tied to any reduction in crime, but actually I think it has a lot to do with increasing crime. And really what it does is reinforce inequity and all sorts of things, because, it has been alleged that these raids were targeted in neighborhoods that the city wanted to raise and otherwise, redevelop and gentrify. And, that's usually been the point of this kind of policing. So somebody has to stand in front of it and try to make it seem like it has something to do with criminal justice, which it doesn't. I mean, there is this, I've covered these kind of units, this kind of policing, this kind of drug warrior kind of stuff for 15, 20 years, and never has it ever reduced crime. It's only increased misery. And so, but somebody, because it's such a big business and the cops are making so much money, and, I think they just like to run into people's houses. I think you can make a lot of, you can kind of make yourself famous and noteworthy for defending it. And I think in this case, I think he was going by the regular playbook of, oh yeah, the grand jury just decided this, and got caught with his pants down because someone in the grand jury said, I'm not taking the blame for not indicting these officers. I'm going to reveal what you did. And that's why this is such an important moment, because really prosecutors have had grand juries as sort of, to blame and to say it's objective and operate on its own. And now it's revealed that no, these prosecutors know exactly what they're doing. And these guys, just like Democratic mayors in places like Minneapolis, have cashed in on policing and the political economy of policing for their entire lives, and I think it's sort of a reckoning of sorts. And hopefully this will bring about real change, but I'm not optimistic, but this could be a critical point.
Let me ask you both, judging by the tone of the attorney of the grand juror, it sounds as though this individual is not only concerned with their anonymity being protected, but possibly their safety. And we know that historically, police at minimum will intimidate people or kill them at maximum. I mean, this is not even in dispute. I don't think I'm saying anything outlandish here. How valid are the concerns you think of this person to be worried about retribution, either coming from law enforcement or coming from possibly some deranged member of the public for, snitching for all intents and purposes? What are your thoughts?
I think they should be absolutely afraid for their life when it comes down to truth telling. Listen, getting justice in America is a dangerous job. Getting justice across the board is a dangerous job. My cousin Jonathan Ferrell was shot and killed by Randall Carrick in North Carolina a couple of years ago, and I can only imagine what the AG brought up in that trial. I can only imagine what the AG presents these grand juries and all of these deaths all of these shootings across America, from Trayvon Martin, to think about what possibly happened with Sandra Bland. If you were to think about how normalized this is because every single time one of these AGs say, well, the grand jury said it was off, I'm trying to figure out whose side of the house the AG is on in general. So of course this person needs to be afraid. It's the cops. You're going against the cops. You're going against the police, and they get away with murder. Right. So if you know that a whole organization, a crime syndicate that can get away with murder, that's not called the mafia, is literally called the governmental agency called the police, and you know that they can get away with murder, then you got to do everything you can to live your life. Add on that there's white supremacists in America running around state capitals with AR-15s like it's no problem. So we are in a place where if you even attempt to defend the livelihood of African Americans, Latinx folks, people of color against police, you're going against a fundamental system that is used to keep us down and increase the profit margin for very big corporations by sending us to jail, by gentrifying our neighborhoods, by doing all these things, right? The cops are the spear tip for that type of oppression. So yeah, be very careful. I hope that this lady or man has all of the security measures possible and an independent security company, because you can't hire the cops.
Well, an interesting thing to remember is that, a document was leaked couple weeks ago that showed that prosecutors had offered a deal to Breonna Taylor's ex-boyfriend that if he implicated her, that he would get a more lenient charge. So law enforcement is very good at retaliating against people who speak up or hold it accountable. And, I wouldn't be surprised. I think this person, would have a lot to fear. But, people in the police department has a tremendous amount of power. They know how to go after people. They know how to, I remember like 12 years ago, not to be like an old man, but I wrote a story about police arresting a 7-year-old child named Gerard Mungo in Baltimore. And the case went international. It was huge because it would show the cruelty of the American criminal justice system. And 2 weeks later, they busted into his house and arrested his mom. These cops have no fear. They have no fear. And I would be very concerned as a grand juror that police would plot something to either ensnare them in a criminal case or somehow, precipitate something against them. And I think that's a legitimate concern because law enforcement always strikes back, and they know how to do it and they have the tools to do it. And there's no one, obviously, as you can see with the way the prosecutor behaved with the grand jury, there's no one to stop them.
I mean, Kim, if I could add on, think about Eric Gardner, right? The brother who filmed Eric Gardner,
right,
was one of the most targeted Black people in the city of New York for years. I mean, I believe they're still after this man.
He just got out of prison like 60 days ago. He was in prison since then, pretty much on and off, almost consistently since then. Yeah, you're right. That's a very good example.
Yeah, so they go after us if we're filming them. They go after us. Holding police officers account. Hey, Stephen, you better be careful because you got a whole ass show called Accountability, man. You holding cops accountable will get you killed in this country, point blank.
Well, I can say this much. When I was a reporter, really, high profile takedown police, I got pulled over like 20 times in a period of 4 years. So they tried with me. They just couldn't get me on anything. But I wouldn't put anything past them at all. And I think that the case with Eric Garner is a perfect example. They made that man's life a living hell. And they tried to poison him in prison. I mean, they did all sorts of stuff to that kid. So yeah, I would be very careful.
Yeah, that gentleman, his name was Ramsey Orta. He recorded the police in the NYPD murdering Eric Garner right there on the street. And Stephen Janis, I hope I'm not telling too much, but you told me they put a rat on your car when you were doing big time reporting, exposing police. So yeah,
that wasn't me. That was a police officer. No, they didn't put a rat on my car.
Oh, sorry. No. See, look at me. I'm trying to embellish the story. My bad. They put rats all over Stephen Janis' car. No, that didn't happen. But that's good news. And listen, I hope that this grand juror is taking this time because really they only have only a small window of time before someone either leaks their identity or some, trusty journalist unearths their identity. So I hope they're getting the police treatment where they are scrubbing their social media profile. I hope they get a chance to move.
Look, as Marcus points out, there's probably a couple people in law enforcement right now preparing to leak that person's identity to the media. Like it's going to come from the cops because they'll figure it out and then they'll leak it. I know they will. I have no doubt we'll know in a couple of days, thanks to law enforcement. Yeah.
Well, no, I wanted to say also on the flip side, pertaining specifically to the Breonna Taylor case, I mean, we're seeing some leaks kind of against law enforcement. Vice Media had a video that showed one of the officers involved in Breonna's murder back in her apartment the same night, which is 100% against police protocol. And then there was some other audio and video. One I saw, I think NBC News might have shown this last night, where they were interviewing Breonna's boyfriend. And he told the investigator who was doing the interrogation that one of the cops on the scene asked him, was he struck by any bullets? And Breonna's boyfriend said no. And the cop said to him, well, that's unfortunate. Just to give you...
No, I mean, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you go on.
No, I mean, I was going to say, Kenneth Walker's story is just, a terrible story because, as you pointed out, even though he was in his home, they were in bed and people charged through their door and he got off one bullet. They initially had indicted him for attempted murder. I mean, and when people have to remember, when the prosecutor so-called dropped that case against Kenneth Walker, who's Breonna Taylor's boyfriend, he still left it open that he might recharge it. He said, for now, I'm going to set these charges aside, which means it's looming over his head, that he, at some point, they could decide to indict him again. It's amazing. It's amazing. It's amazing. It's amazing that they offered a deal to Breonna Taylor's boyfriend to implicate her. I mean, think about how brazen that is. Think about it. You already look like you're murderers, or you already murdered someone, and then you go and you try to besmirch her name, after she's dead. I mean, that think about how cruel that is, right? These people don't have any decency, really, when you think about it. They're so used to being in power, and they're so used to being able to enforce what is unreasonable power on people that it corrupts them. I mean, I've seen it with cops all the time in Baltimore City and the stuff that's happened in Baltimore City. So, it's scary. It's scary for a person to take that stance and go out and say, I'm gonna speak the truth about this, because they will suffer because of it.
Well, adding to the long list of routine things that Black people can't do without fear of getting murdered by police, like be asleep in your apartment, like, minding your business, walking home. We saw a very similar case happen tragically last year in Aurora, Colorado with Elijah McClain. He was the young Black man who was walking to the store. He was wearing a face mask because he was anemic, so he was cold. Someone called the police and said that he looked suspicious. I guess, Black and minding your business is suspicious all of the days. Can't say these days. That has been the case really in America since its founding. But what the scarier part about what happened to Elijah was the fact that police, seemingly at the behest of paramedics, administered a very powerful sedative to him called ketamine, Special K, if I'm not mistaken, that's what it is. And when police accountability. What? I'm sorry, Stephen?
No, I said when I take it, that's what I call it.
Special K. Right. So the Police Accountability Report, a program which I'm sure everyone who's watching is familiar with here on The Real News. They're doing a special 2-part series about how cops drug people. I want us to look at this clip. Reporting about this is our own Taya Graham. They actually Taya and Stephen spoke with an elected official from Colorado who had an experience with her partner being detained by police and being administered ketamine. We're going to get that story after we check out this clip from Taya Graham from Police Accountability Report.
I think Anita's story makes something clear, how the imperative of law enforcement to impose control over our bodies corrupts the institutions and processes designed to protect us. Given the explosion of the use of ketamine by police, it seems odd there's so little data or study or even justification for its use. It raises the question of how this powerful anesthetic approved for use in hospital settings only has suddenly become a suitable drug to administer at the discretion of cops who hardly qualify as medical experts. In fact, even the state health department confirmed there were 902 reported instances of Colorado paramedics administering ketamine from 2018 to 2020. And almost 17% of these cases had complications including cardiac arrest and oxygen deprivation. Perhaps the whistleblower lawsuit by a paramedic can shed some light on the situation. His name is Joseph Paul Baker, and he sued the city of Woodbury, Minnesota, because he felt pressured by cops to administer ketamine to people who didn't need it. In fact, Baker alleges in the suit, when he pushed back, he faced retaliation from his superiors for not following the orders of officers who demanded he administer ketamine, despite his assessment that doing so would be dangerous. City officials there would not respond to his claims, and the lawsuit is still pending. But it shows why the story of the rise in use of ketamine by law enforcement is so troubling. That's because many of the situations where ketamine has been used with harmful results occurred when cops had already escalated a less than urgent situation.
Probably not.
That was Taya Graham reporting for the Police Accountability Report. Stephen Janis, I know you've been working on this story. First of all, 900 instances of use of ketamine in connection to.
Yeah, in 2 years. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which is, and that's just in one state.
That's in one state.
Well, what really was perplexing to me about this story is, first of all, you don't know how ketamine will react with someone's system. I mean, it's something that they could be allergic to. I mean, sort of like, penicillin or ibuprofen or aspirin. I mean, these are things that should be known about a person before it's administered. And yet police are encouraging paramedics to give this powerful drug to people who are in police custody. How did you even find out about this outside of the Elijah McClain story about how prevalent this usage is?
Well, one of our people that helps us, we have sort of now a network of cop watchers across the country, and they put us in touch with Anita Springsteen, who is a councilwoman. And, because we were looking into more cases related to this, because, Elijah McClain's case obviously isn't, isolated, because, and you make a good point. I mean, ketamine is approved as an anesthetic. And actually, the American Association of Anesthesiologists have said publicly that they don't think this should be administered, because this is what's known as an off-label use, meaning the FDA has not approved giving ketamine to people for exactly the reasons you described, which is that you don't know how someone's going to react. And of course, a lot of it is based upon this false junk science created by policing called excited delirium, which is supposedly a condition when cops are leaning on top of you and choking you, you become a little agitated. And so they've created this fake condition with a sort of a fake antidote. And it was interesting because if you listen to the Elijah McClain body cam footage, you hear the police officer saying before the paramedics arrive, hey, we should give him ketamine. They're like, yeah, absolutely, while they're leaning on top of him and causing him to suffocate. And I think what is really difficult to figure out about this story, and we're still working on it, is how police even got the idea to give people ketamine. They're giving 500 they gave Elijah McClain 500 milligrams. That is a huge dosage. I mean, remember, this also, prior to being an anesthetic for humans, was like an animal tranquilizer for large animals. So it's just astonishing that cops who know nothing about medicine have the ability to give you a very strong anesthetic in a huge dose in a situation where no one is really taking your vitals. And really, if you use it off-label, you're supposed to be under supervision of a doctor, not a cop or an EMT. So it's really one of those things that has crept into the law enforcement arsenal and is scary because I don't really think anybody's watching it.
Marcus, I think about a younger me, a younger, mouthier me who, might have had some choice words for the police. I still might have some choice words for the police, but I'm old now and I'm scared to get hit. But right. But Marcus, I mean, when I hear that police are willy-nilly administering ketamine to people who are, quote, excited delirium, not people who are upset that they may be detained unjustifiably or put in handcuffs, or perhaps are being put in a stress position, that could cause positional asphyxiation where they literally can't breathe. And the police solution is to shoot them up with 500 milliliters of this drug. What goes through your mind when you hear that this is now very much on the table and stuff of things that police can legally do to you?
Well, I question if it's legal or not. When I served in the United States Navy, I was a Navy corpsman. Spent a lot of time in the back of an ambulance, and I did some work as a paramedic for a couple of years before I switched over to what we're doing right now. And I remember this very clearly, that there was only 6 drugs that we were allowed to administer without a doctor's permission. So this is scary. And what scares me more is we're talking about police officers who already have a misconception of what a black male body, a black person body looks like. I mean, it's one of the reasons why women in hospitals don't get the right amount of pain treatment, is because folks already think that black women can deal with more pain than white women. Right. When you see a big black guy walking down the street, automatically he's more, dangerous and more physical off top just because of his skin tone. So if you have these perceptions of human beings, and then you add the opportunity for them to legally or illegally drug someone and put like ketamine in their body without a doctor around, it's going to lead to a lot more deaths. And also, how about this? How about you get your damn knee out my back? Right? Let's start there. Like, yeah, I'm going to be a little fidgety because I can't breathe. I'm trying to breathe, right? I'm trying to live. So you're trying to take away my life, not realizing that I'm not this big buck horse or animal or whatever you want to call me, that you think that you have to control and fight and suppress with your physical being and drugs, right? So it's a dangerous expectation, and I hope that the practice stops, and I hope this research goes in, and it needs to be known, worldwide, how bad of an issue this is. Doctors need to be there to prescribe this drug. So a cop, doing it, I mean, I think there should be many malpractice suits happening against police departments and these hospitals and these EMTs who prescribe the stuff.
Stephen, I know you and Taya looked at the case pertaining to Councilwoman Springfield's partner. We know Elijah McClain was African-American, and in the video in your piece, I couldn't tell, was her partner Black as well?
No, he's white. He's white. And, I think the reason the councilwoman was so concerned was because he was cooperating. I think, a lot of these things like tasers and ketamine are a substitute for cops' inability to just deal with people. They've been empowered by the drug war and other things and sort of propaganda to use extremely violent and I think tactics where they don't understand that the public is not always going to do everything they say. And when you don't, or when they just don't feel like dealing with it, I think they just have found something, well, let's tase him, or let's put, some ketamine in his system. And I think in the case of Anita Springsteen, the councilwoman, her boyfriend was cooperating. And the next thing you know, he's got 500 milligrams of ketamine in him. And it's kind of scary to think if you had a family member who gets into some sort of arrest situation and suddenly they're pumping this. And Marcus's point is an excellent point. There's no way that any cop or even EMT is qualified to supervise someone under anesthesia. It doesn't make any sense. And yet what's really scary is I've yet to be able to piece together how this even became a thing. You know what I mean? Like it's not like it's been tested or there's some association of emergency medical. It's just sort of filtered into the repertoire of emergency medical technicians, but without really, I think, any proper vetting. And obviously, if the American Association of Anesthesiologists are saying we shouldn't do this, I think they know what they're talking about, right? But yet it still goes on, and even after the death of Elijah McClain, they're still doing it. So I don't know. It's very scary.
I mean, you and Taya's reporting found, over 900 instances of ketamine use by law enforcement in the state of Colorado over the period of a year. Do we know how many other states are using this in this way?
I mean, we know they're using it in Minnesota, and we know they're using it in about, I think, half a dozen other states. And, it's really, there's no national database on this, and it's very ad hoc. And, we're still trying, I don't want to say anything definitive because I'm still sending emails around the country trying to figure out, exactly, but there's no ketamine like study being done by a specific drug maker that collates this data. But, some in Baltimore, they use, I think it was Adderall or there's another, there many of police departments are using some sort of chemical restraint, so to speak. And we hopefully will get a handle on the numbers, but it's very hard because it's not something that, really is studied, like, let's say, taser deployment or even use of force, which actually there's no national database for police use of force either. So yeah, it's something we're trying to piece together, but I don't want to say anything until I know definitively, how many places, because I got to email people and just ask them, what's your data? Are you using it? You get these cases like the case in Minneapolis where EMT pushed back, but in some cases, you just don't know if they're using it.
Well, Stephen, I know that what we just saw was an excerpt from part 1 of your reporting. What can we expect in part 2 of this coverage?
Well, part 2, we talked to a doctor who speaks out very strongly about some of the dangers that he feels, and also he thinks that this has at the root of this, like many things in policing that doesn't get talked about, is profit. That some of the pharmaceutical companies are trying to, make money. Now ketamine is is an old drug. It's hard to patent, but I think his thinking is that if you can create sort of a specialized ketamine for use by law enforcement, you can make a ton of money. Just like, for example, how body cams, Taser got into body cams and makes a ton of money. So we'll be having that perspective. Something we like to focus on in PAR is the political economy of policing, which is, how policing and money mix to create sort of a political hegemony over the political process to keep policing going and growing and more profitable. And I think that's what we're going to be looking at in this episode.
All right. Well, listen, gang, we want you to be sure to tune in to Police Accountability Reports. It airs right here Thursday nights live. And Stephen, there's a podcast new for PAR. Yeah. Tell us about that real quick.
Well, just real quickly, we're doing this in conjunction with Dwayne, where we add a little bit of the context before and after the show, and we do a discussion where we sort of talk about the reasons that we're looking into something or additional information or have additional thoughts that we couldn't fit into the show itself. So it's like it adds, if 20 minutes isn't enough for you, you get another 20 minutes of Tay and I talking about policing. So really should satisfy your police accountability needs for a week. So yeah, it's just a nice augment to the show.
Definitely. Find the podcast, the Police Accountability Report podcast on Spotify and everywhere else you get your podcasts. Stephen Janis, investigative reporter for the Police Accountability Report. We appreciate you making some time for us today on Stir Crazy, Stephen. Thank you as always.
Thank you so much for having me, Kim. I appreciate it. Thank you, Marcus. Take care.
Thank you.
All right, guys. So as I said at the top of the show, why even debate? Well, one reason we can debate or we can watch the debate is because, for God's sakes, we need some comic relief. And I know the shit is not supposed to be funny. It's going to be funny, though. And to talk about this, give us a little bit of a debate preview. Marcus is still with us, but we're going to bring in a friend of the show, Adriel Hampton, possibly
Adriel Hampton,
the next governor of California. Be looking for him, California. Adriel, we appreciate
the most popular socialist since Upton Sinclair.
That's right. And
California.
He got all the heat for Gavin Newsom on his Twitter page. You should follow Adriel on Twitter if you don't already. Gentlemen, we've got a debate tonight, and I'm not going to be ageist here and point out the fact that these are two elderly white men of questionable cognitive ability, but that's what we're going to see tonight. And one of them is a bully, and one of them, I don't know if he's going to get his Prevagen milkshake in on time. I hope they give him a double shot of some Prevagen. But what can we expect tonight? Well, wait, before I even ask y'all what can we expect, let's take a look back in time, shall we? And we know that Donald Trump really made his mark politically during the 2016 GOP primary campaign, where he just roasted everyone not named Trump, from Little Marco to Ted Cruz to Jeb Bush to everybody. So here's a clip from the 10th GOP debate where Trump was being Trump, basically, and got into it with Marco Rubio. Let's take a look at that.
I think it's fine. It's an important point that you raise and we discuss on immigration. This is a big issue for Texas, a huge issue for the country. But I also think that if you're going to claim that you're the only one that lifted this into the campaign, that you acknowledge that, for example, you're the only person on the stage that's ever been fined for hiring people to work on your projects illegally. You hired some workers from Poland.
I'm the only one on the stage that's hired people. You haven't hired anybody.
Well, in fact, some of the people we hired. Well, but hold on.
I've hired tens of thousands of people over my job. You've hired
1,000 people from another company, from another country.
Credit cards, etc.
Let me say. Let me finish the statement. This is important.
You haven't hired one person
He
in your
hired
life.
workers from Poland, and he had to pay $1 million or so in a judgment.
That's wrong.
That's a fact.
Totally wrong.
Well, people can look it up. I'm sure people are Googling it right now. Look it up. Trump Polish workers. You'll see $1 million for hiring illegal workers on one of his projects. Yeah, he did.
You know, it's interesting.
That happened.
I've hired tens of thousands of people over my lifetime. Tens of thousands.
Many from other countries instead of hiring Americans.
Be quiet. Let me talk. I've hired tens of thousands of people. He brings up something from 30 years ago. It worked out very well. Everybody was happy.
Paid $1 million.
And by the way, the laws were totally different. Right. That was a whole different world.
Thank you.
But I've hired people. Nobody up here has hired
Senator
anybody.
Cruz.
2016, Donald Trump. And, you know, Marcus and Adriel, when I see that clip and similar clips like it, because Trump is probably the most flawed president / at that time candidate that we have probably seen in a very, very long time. And Marco Rubio was raising some pretty valid points about Donald Trump hiring people, not Americans, at his different properties in Florida. It's something that I think would have resonated with the Republican base, and yet it didn't. And we know there's been a lot of news about Trump this week, most notably his lack of federal taxes that he has paid over the past 15 or so years. The first year he was in office, he paid $750 in taxes, which nobody here on this call has ever paid $750 in federal taxes. But that kind of stuff does not.
When I was 15.
Exactly. That doesn't seem to deter his base. So what kind of problems is Joe Biden going to run into trying to use Trump's record against him? But it's almost like the son of a bitch is Teflon. It doesn't work. Marcus, let me start with you.
This is a bad idea, Joe Biden. Joe Biden shouldn't have took this debate. That's what I think. And let me tell you why. Because debates are meant to show the world your issues, right? But really, the function of a debate is to be the most popular person and have the most hits and have the most, gotcha moments than actual functional policy, right? Nobody gives a damn about policy. Nobody's going to leave that debate talking about, Trump platinum plan and Biden's lift every voice plan. Nobody gives a damn about that stuff. The only thing they're there to see is the punches. And I mean, say what you want about Trump. He's going to clown Joe Biden tonight. It's not going to be a pretty thing. And I hope it's not like this, right? And this takes me back to why you motherfuckers should have voted for Bernie Sanders or somebody else. But we got who we have right now. But if you had voted for somebody who could swing back, punch, have some kind of spark, have some kind of lifeline, doesn't necessarily need whatever to stay awake up there, that would have been a helping hand. But now we have Joe Biden, and I'm not certain if Joe Biden can stay on the stage with Trump, who is just a living mockery of a president. But this is the perfect setup for him. All he has to do is just say some zingy stuff, and that's what he does for a living.
Adriel, I mean, surely Joe Biden knows that Trump is going to come in there talking shit off the top, right? Name calling, linking him to all kinds of things that he may not be linked to, including defunding the police and Medicare for all. What does Joe Biden need to do in order to literally keep his head above water so that Trump does not swallow him whole on that stage?
I think it'd be really interesting if he tries to call names, because I agree 100% with Marcus's point that Trump is trained. He's up there doing wrestling on TV, and I mean, he's like a born liar, right? And but you had Joe Biden, he can call a constituent a dog-faced pony soldier. So I hope that he can get up there and throw some punches. I think, again, I'm going to go with Marcus on he could talk about his climate plan and the difference between Trump's climate plan, but it's already baked in. Everybody knows it, and it's not what's going to move the needle tonight. And I also agree with the point that they should have just not done debates, because it's like you're acknowledging a bully on their own turf, and that's problematic. And I think it goes to two things: hubris, politicians thinking they're smarter and more important than they are, and two, the fact that it is to a great extent scripted, and maybe he's got a lot of really great lines, and his people just think that he can deliver them.
I want us to take a look, if we could, at a past Joe Biden performance. And, now that I'm thinking about it, I actually should have dug for Biden v. Palin debate, because that's probably a little closer to what Joe Biden is going to be encountering when it comes to Trump. Someone not all that bright, but who can remember a couple of one-liners and deliver them on cue. But instead, I picked a clip from Biden versus Paul Ryan from 2012 during the vice presidential debate. And of course, because it's Biden and Paul Ryan, it's a little boring, but deal with it for a moment if you could, because hopefully this salient, more mentally swift Joe Biden might appear tonight, but this was 8 years ago, so who can really say? Dwayne, let's take a look at that clip, please.
And by the way, they talk about this great recession. If it fell out of the sky, like, oh my goodness, where did it come from? It came from this man voting to put 2 wars in a credit card, to at the same time put a prescription drug benefit in the credit card, a $1 trillion tax cut for very wealthy. I was there. I voted against them. I said, no, we can't afford that. And now all of a sudden, these guys are so seized with the concern about the debt that they created.
Congressman Ryan.
Let's not forget that they came in with one-party control. When Barack Obama was elected, his party controlled everything. They had the ability to do everything of their choosing, and look at where we are right now. They passed the stimulus. The idea that we could borrow $831 billion, spend it on all these special interest groups, and that it would work out just fine. That unemployment would never get to 8%. It went up above 8% for 43 months. They said that right now, if we just passed this stimulus, the economy would grow at 4%. It's growing at 1.3%.
When could you get it below 6%?
That's what our entire premise of our pro-growth plan for a stronger middle class is all about. Getting the economy growing at 4%, creating 12 million jobs over the next 4 years. Look at just the $90 billion in stimulus. And the vice president was in charge of overseeing this. $90 billion in green pork to campaign contributors and special interest groups. There are, just at the Department of Energy, over 100 criminal investigations that have been launched into just how stimulus spends are being spent.
Martha, look, his colleague runs an investigative committee, spent months and months and months going into this.
This is the Inspector General.
Months and months. They found no evidence of cronyism. And I love my friend here. I'm not allowed to show letters, but go on our website. He sent me 2 letters saying, by the way, can you send me some stimulus money for companies here in the state of Wisconsin? We sent millions of dollars. You know why he said
you did ask for stimulus money?
Sure, he did. By the way,
on 2 occasions, we advocated for constituents who are applying for grants. That's what we do. We do that for all constituents who are applying.
I love that. I love that. This is such a bad program, and he writes me a letter saying, writes the Department of Energy a letter saying, the reason we need this stimulus, it will create growth and jobs. His words. And now he's sitting here looking at me. And by the way, that program, again, investigated. What the Congress said was it was a model. Less than 0.4% waste or fraud in the program. And all this talk about cronyism. They investigated, did not find one single piece of evidence. I wish he would just be a little more candid.
You know, what's interesting about watching that Joe Biden from 8 years ago is that guy could rattle off some facts and figures off the top of his head. That guy knows when to crack a smile and crack a laugh. I don't know if 2020 Joe Biden is going to be that prepared. Adriel, first of all, looking at Paul Ryan, that's a punchable face. I just had to say that. But getting back to the question, can Joe Biden get into fighting form? Can he be like that? Or it's going to be way worse than that?
Well, I also agree with you on Paul Ryan. I almost took a note. I got to say something bad about Paul Ryan because I'd forgotten what a schmuck he was. And good riddance. Joe Biden, I think, thinks he's more alpha than Trump. And Trump's whole thing is what a big alpha he is. So you're going to see, I think, like physical debating, where they're puffing themselves up, they're leaning and acting. Joe Biden is the one who said, challenged a guy to run or do push-ups or something. And he called him fat instead of Jack. And it was like a slip. It was a slip to call him fat. They're both kind of weird dudes, and they, so I don't think they're going to have the memory going of all these facts, although that's what they've been training on. They're going to be kind of going at each other, and it could be weird. Or one of them's going to have a heart attack. Stroke.
Marcus, first of all, Trump has been talking big shit. Trump said, I'm not even preparing for this bullshit. I'm just going to my rallies. I'm going about my business. I get debate prep from going to my daily pressers in the White House. I don't need to prep for Joe Biden, weak ass. Meanwhile, Joe Biden been in his basement in Wilmington, with the Rocky theme music on in the background. I mean, I don't even know who's moderating this tonight. Chris Wallace from Fox News. Chris Wallace usually asks pretty specific questions. I don't think either candidate is really going to be able to stay on topic. What are your thoughts, Marcus?
I know I'm preparing for this debate. I'm gonna be lit. I'm gonna get so lit before this debate even starts. And then I'm gonna laugh my ass off at these two people interrupting each other. You won't hear one whole sentence tonight besides I'm Joe Biden and I'm running for president. I'm Donald Trump and I want to be the president again. That's the only whole sentence you'll hear. Besides that, it's going to be two old white men literally.
Absolutely is what's going to happen.
And listen. And you're right, Adriel. We're gonna have to make sure the paramedics are closed because they're gonna be mad. They're going to
be so mad.
Their face is going to be red. Like Trump's face is going to be red because I promise you. See, here's the thing. Nobody has asked Trump about his taxes, and Joe Biden's going to mention that, right? And no one has held him accountable in real time. Don't forget something. He controls the hell out of his press conferences at the White House, right? Next. I'm going, you next. Shut up. You next. Like he controls it. You're not going to be able to control the old ass, ornery ass Joe Biden. That's not going to happen. So they're going to be yelling at each other. They're going to be screaming at each other. And I'm just going to be lit having fun watching this shit.
It's amazing. This is the best debate prep stream going, Kim.
From the comments, guys, the Salt Lakers says, booze or no booze? Are we going to play a drinking game during tonight's debate events? And Thea Napper says, this debate is going to be cringy as fuck. Where else we got in the comments? From Arjun. Oh, Arjun, I can't pronounce your last name, sweetheart. Drink every time Biden makes a gaffe. Oh, everybody's going to be fucked up if that's the case.
I was going to say every time you see a throbbing vein in one of their heads, it's a drink.
The Salt Lakers also says, I would rather have both candidates drop acid. Yes. Can we do the Adriel? Make sure that's what happens during you and Gavin Newsom's debate in 2024.
I'll challenge him to that. I mean, I think that's essential. If you're going to be governor of California, could you do it on acid? Because otherwise,
Is it microdosing or full trip?
That's Salt Laker.
Schultzy 100 says, I know it's wrong, but yeah, I'd rather see them compete in some track events or something. But yeah, I guess you're right. One of them would probably die. Listen, let me just say this for the record. We are not wishing death on either candidate tonight. Okay. We mostly hope that they are healthy and make it to the following day. MD says, and none of them truly speaks for the people. And I think that's where I believe it with the comments. So guys, I mean, so this is the first of 3 debates. I'm wondering whether or not, and this is specifically aimed at Biden, if he performs exceptionally badly, do you think his team would pull him from the remaining 2 debates? Because that is a question, at least from what I'm watching on the television, that some undecided voters have. They question Biden's cognitive function. And I hate to speculate about, what someone's potential health issue is, but something's going on. And I'm not saying even that nothing is going on with Trump. They just may have a different version of the same thing. What happens if Biden does bad tonight, Adriel? What does that mean for his debate performances between now and Election Day?
I mean, I think he has to do all 3 because it gets worse if they try to hide him. And there was that whole thing, saying like, where's Biden after the Democratic primary? He was kind of laying low during the pandemic, and everyone was, but it becomes more conspicuous when people want you on camera all the time. People have said about Joe Biden that he's kind of always been kind of dumb and made gaffes. And you pointed out some things that like he can debate, but that he's not the fastest on his feet. But Trump says really weird stuff. George W. Bush used to say really weird stuff. So the worst thing is not being out there saying something. I even think that, like, almost like when Marcus is talking about the blows that are getting covered by the media or how are people going to rank it, you could almost do a good gaffe. Biden's greatest hope is that he makes a funny gaffe that people love that makes people like him.
Marcus, how much of the fact that tonight's debate's being held in Cleveland, in front of a live audience, but a reduced audience, clearly because of COVID. You know, Trump really thrives on the crowd and the crowd reaction. We saw that a bit in that earlier clip from 2016, that debate. You know, when he gets the cheers, that's his cue to keep going and to go harder. So is a lack of an audience or a lack of a loud, big audience going to be enough to sort of take him out of this mentally, in your opinion?
No. As a matter of fact, no. Listen, no, because Trump is going to Trump. That's what he does. Like he takes normal press conferences and trumps it, right? Whatever a trumping of something is, he takes normal discussion and trumps it. If you remember, and all right, and should you asked the question earlier? Should the Biden campaign pull Biden from debates? If he performs well tonight, I think they should. I mean, if he performs bad tonight, I think they should. Why? Because Trump hasn't paid taxes and it hasn't messed up his numbers at all. He's still trumping. He's still running for president, right? So, and plus, there's no undecided voters. I don't give a damn. If first, there's not an undecided voter. It's people who are either going to turn out and vote for Biden or not. There's no undecided voters. These debates aren't going to change anybody's mind. You're going into this debate hoping that Biden does well, or you're going into this debate hoping that Trump says something very, very racist to motivate his base, right? Like that's what people are watching the debate for, not issues, not policies. So what's the point of having Biden, who is obviously doing some version of surging in the polls right now? What's the point of having him even show up when you know that his cognitive abilities sometimes slack and lack in these spaces? No, the Biden campaign only needs to worry about Kamala Harris and showing up against Pence. That's the debate that we want to watch. That's the debate that we want to see. That's the debate that is actually going to have something about policy for these silly ass undecided voters. Who, you know, and I'm sorry if this offends you, but like I got more respect for non-voters than undecided voters at this point. You're either voting for a racist or not. You're either supporting racism or you're not, right? Is that simple? So, you know, like don't vote for racism.
How am I going to do that?
Well,
how am I going to do that?
Very good point. Very good point.
You know, like, the fact that this IRS story regarding Trump has come out, I think it was ProPublica. I saw this floating around on social media earlier today, where ProPublica had done a story either earlier this year or last year, where the IRS said that basically the reason that they don't audit wealthy people as much as they audit poor people is because it costs more money to audit the wealthy. So it's just cheaper just to fuck with the poor. And I hope even Trump supporters can see the injustice of billionaires and multimillionaires like Donald Trump. And by the way, not paying taxes. And by the way, can we send a special fuck you out to NBC News for basically re-injecting Trump with enough cash to stay afloat and giving him a media platform with The Apprentice to remain relevant and bring us this demon spawn that is now our 45th president? NBC, this is all y'all's fault.
Way worse than Jill Stein.
Tell him, Adriel. Listen, y'all, we're going to get out of here right now because we got debate prep coming up. People got weed to roll, drinks to make. So listen, we will see y'all back here later this week for more Stir Crazy. I'd like to thank our guests today, Adriel Hampton, Marcus Ferrell, Stephen Janis from Police Accountability Report. We appreciate y'all checking us out. Don't forget, we are in the middle of a fundraising drive, so go to therealnews.com/donate. And I know times are rough, but we want to keep bringing you these kind of stories. Most importantly, this perspective. So even if it's just a couple of dollars, send us what you can. We sure appreciate it. Thank y'all so much. I'm Kim Brown. We will see y'all later. Don't get too high or too drunk watching Joe Biden and Donald Trump tonight. See y'all later. Thanks, bye. Thank you, Adriel. Thanks for coming through in the clutch.